Zimbabwe simuka udzosere, Zimbabwe simuka, Zimbabwe simuka udzosere, wawakaurawa. Zimbabwe simuka vezanu vayeuke, vauraya nyika. Zimbabwe simuka. Kubasa kwandinoshanda, ndobira mumutsitsi. Nitambire mari yangu, kubira mumutsitsi. Baba ere, ndosorora rini. Zimbabwe simuka vezanu vayeuke, vauraya. Mafuta edzimota kubira mumutsitsi. Nitengere mhuri yangu, ndobira mumutsitsi. Baba ere, simuka. Zimbabwe simuka vezanu vayeuke. Kana ndichida chingwa, pamwe hapana. Kana ndichida petu, pamwe hapana. Kana ndichida shuga, pamwe hapana. Niende kuchipatara, hapana. Simuka. Kana ndichida uchingwa, pamwe hapana. Kana ndichida shuga, pamwe hapana. Uzoti ndada mari, pamwe hapana. Vari Botswana makwerekwere, uyaitiranganyika. Vari Joburg masimba, uyaitiranganyika. Vezanu vaya zvino vamu, zvimbebenenga. Zimbabwe simuka, simuka. Zimbabwe simuka udzosere. Ndarwara kuchipatara zvendobira mumutsitsi. Ndazorora murufu ndotorwa mumutsitsi. Baba here, ndozorora rini.
Is run by dictatorship that has no love for people. By
economic structural adjustment programs. So they were for alternative views. And one of the most important aspects that came out from that engagement was that for economists, they were very surprised that a political scientist was raising this matter. And it shows how some economists view this matter. They regard it as an economics issue. And when we engaged and exchanged on Twitter, it became very clear that natural resource management is a social issue. As communities are affected, communities have expectations, and it's also a political issue. And looking at it from a political settlements theory, natural resources actually shapes the politics of the country, and the politics of the country is also shapes the policies, natural resources management policies of any country. So we need to look at these issues firstly from an ideological point of view by looking at the natural resources nationalism. And we have got Comrade Farai Magu. Most of you know the comrade. He's got a very good profile in the civic society, and he has been working tirelessly. You are all aware of our challenges in the diamond sector in Chiazwa, where despite alluvial diamonds, we have not received much in terms of benefit to the country. So Comrade Magu will come in with spent 40 days in prison 2010 fighting for Chiazwa communities in Mutare. He is a holder of an MA degree and is a current student or a PhD candidate with Wits University. So I invite Comrade Farai Magu to come in, and after that we'll have the next speaker, who is Comrade Janet Jo, who is the Executive Director of ZimCode. She has got extensive activism experience. I will introduce her properly after Comrade Magu has finished speaking. For now, I will invite Comrade Farai Magu to speak for 10 minutes on natural resources nationalism. May you unmute your mic, please?
Comrade.
Hello, Comrade Farai.
Hello.
We will. I'm trying to follow up. I think there is some connectivity challenges. But the Comrade Janet Jo to accept and to speak. Kindly accept the invitation to speak, and we see whether we can move on to Comrade Jo. Again, we still have some challenges with the. I will invite Comrade Mukasiri to speak. Comrade Mukasiri will speak on domestic resource mobilization opportunities and challenges in Zimbabwe, and they will specifically look at lithium mining sector, subsector. So, Comrade Kasiri, may you please introduce yourself and take the floor.
Thanks, Peter. I hope I'm audible. Am I?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Just to confirm, how many minutes do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. All right.
Yes.
I know the festive mood is still with us, so sometimes to be switched on could be difficult, but at the same time, there are important national developmental issues that are happening. I think this is why we are having this conversation now, just to show how switched on again citizens are when it comes to having a pulse feel on issues that affect or that impact the trajectory of development of this country. Sibanda Mukasiri is my name. I'm the coordinator of the Stop the Bleeding campaign. It is a campaign that is driven to stop the bleeding of finance for development on the continent. It comes out of the realization via foreign direct investment dwarfed by what Africa loses through illicit financial flows and also the skewed or the general power imbalances that have made Africa and the global South in general providers of raw materials to the global North, and with such a system that is rigged to ensure that the development on the continent will always suffer, and we always refer to aid and foreign direct investment instead of looking at the opportunities to enhance our domestic resource mobilization capacities. I think what is important, as I highlight, that when momentum, when the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows from Africa was launched in 2015, led by the former president, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki. This report came up with this huge figure that Africa is losing, was losing then 50 billion annually to illicit financial flows, and the extractive sector being the epicenter of the losses. Come 2019, come 2020, we also have got a report from UNCTAD, the United Conference on Trade and Economic Trade and Development, which is also highlighted that the illicit financial flows from the continent is ballooned from 50 billion. We're talking about 88.6 billion, roughly 89 billion. And again, the extractive sector is the epicenter of illicit financial flows. And what causes these illicit financial flows? The main reasons or the drivers are poor contracts and poor secretive contracts. For Zimbabwe, I think when we talk about mega deals or deals in the mining sector, one we have to be historical about it. When we talk about the RAD concession that was signed in 1888 or 89, thereabout, and it is the contract, if you read it closely, it was all about giving access, unlimited access to the roads company in terms of the mineral resources that Zimbabwe had then, and this led to the colonization of the country. So you would want now to learn, to reflect and say, how far have we gone in terms of understanding how these mining mega deals can prejudice the development opportunities of a country, looking at Zimbabwe, number one. And we draw this to our constitution, section 315, subsection 2C, which is very clear that there's an act of parliament that is required to guide the negotiation and performance of mining agreements. And it's now 7 years have passed since the new constitution was enacted, and we do not have such a provision legal-wise. The second aspect as a driver of illicit financial flows is the overly generous tax incentives. If you read literature or research around domestic resource mobilization in the extractive sector, it is very clear that what predominantly attracts investors in the mining sector is your resource, your mineral wealth potential. And according to the Policy Perception Index of the Fraser Institute, you find that over 60% of the decisions are influenced by where minerals are located. And Zimbabwe is a country that has got a high mineral wealth potential, and that is also acknowledged in the lithium sector. So it is a huge leverage. Other factors also that comes into play are your infrastructure, political stability, peace, respect to property rights. You talk about also jobs, the availability of skilled labor. So necessarily, it means that the fiscal instrument is not the only tool in the box that we can use to attract investment. But unfortunately, because also Zimbabwe is under sanctions, I have to bring this into play. It also affects and impinge the nature in which the country can also freely attract investment in the sector. It is debatable, but obviously the impact is there. I should highlight this. Then the third factor that is also key for us to understand is that there is the issue of abuse of transfer pricing. And it's important to understand that, again, when we reflect on the report of the high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, it was very clear that, yes, we talk about corruption. Corruption plays a far marginal role when it comes to driving resource leakages from the continent. But it also facilitates the big, I would say, corruption that is being done primarily by multinational corporations, which are responsible for 65% of illicit financial flows from the continent. 30% is attributed to criminal activities, and 5% being attributed to commercial activities. So it is also important that as much as we focus on some of the challenges that we see from the political actors and everything, who also facilitate the plunder of resources by multinational corporations, we also focus on the role of multinational corporations. In this case, I think we'll have, as we go on, you have the opportunity to dissect this. What is the role of the junior companies that are investing in the sector? For instance, in this case, Prospect Resources, they listed at the Australian stock exchanges. What is the role of China as an investor here? Talking about the double taxation agreement that is there between Zimbabwe and China, how it facilitates also or disable or other. So it's very important. Another factor that is also important as we talk about domestic resource mobilization is the under-invoicing and under-invoicing of the quantity and quality of minerals. But since we have let me wrap up this conversation by saying that it's important to understand that Zimbabwe has got a 12 billion plan in the sector to earn 12 billion by 2023. Of course, this target would not be achieved, but at the same time, we've seen significant inroad when it comes to investment in the platinum sector, and in this case, the lithium sector. But the issue that is there is the 12 billion we are talking about is the foreign currency generation or earnings that we are looking at. What is at stake when it comes to the fiscus, which then can translate into investment in our health, education sector? This issue is not just about tax, it's also about wage evasion. When civil servants want better salaries, we also look at how well is this deal structured to be able to deliver that. So that is my parting shot. So in general, as I conclude, I just want to underscore the point that it is important for us to realize that the mining sector by nature, for not only for Zimbabwe, but for Africa, is the most vulnerable sector when it comes to driving resource leakages from the continent. And it is important that we look at the role of also multinational corporations and the skewed global economic and financial architecture that is designed to impoverish Africa. As we talk now, as we are having this conversation, we have ongoing global tax reforms, and this would have been an opportunity for fair representation and participation, particularly of marginalized global South. But your rich clubs, your OECD, your G7, G20 are the leaders, and the way it is structured right now, it does not favor or enhance the fiscal capabilities of resource-rich countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Mukasiri. You raise very important aspects there, and this feeds into the question that we need to respond to. Why is it that with a lot of natural resources endowment in Africa, we are failing to develop our countries, except for few like Botswana, for example? Most African countries that are richly endowed with natural resources are actually finding themselves with different challenges: political instability, failure or stunted growth, and also marginalization of various communities, women, youth, and local indigenous communities. There have been many theories that have come on board. One of the most prominent one is the resource curse, that the more a country has rich resource endowment, the more it also has many problems, social, political, and economic problems. And again, the paradox of the plenty also seeks to explain why especially Africa, Latin America, and South American nations who are richly endowed with natural resources to find themselves in big problems without economic development. But to give a context for the Zimbabwean context, it is very important that we discuss this matter. One, as I've pointed out, with Chiadzwa and diamond mining in Marange. If you go to Marange currently, you would not think that there are alluvial diamonds there that are cheap to mine. The communities have not benefited. In fact, they've lost their dwellings. They've also lost their water sources. Their roads are in poor shape. There are lots of complaints from the community. If you also look at its contribution to the system, we have not received anything tangible despite all these years of mining alluvial diamonds in Chiadzwa. Currently, if you go to UMP, if you go to Chilonga, if you go to Dinde, if you go to Wanke, there are a lot of challenges that local communities are facing from mining companies. And this is why this is important. If we go to NDS 1 on strategies for mining, the government says in Zimbabwe we've got over 40 minerals, which include gold, platinum, and other metals. And one of the areas that the government says is the limiting factor is weak governance in the sector. And in order to achieve increased and sustainable growth in mining sector, the priority of NDS 1 will be to improve the ease of doing business in the sector. And they think that this will be realized through finalization and implementation of mineral specific policy frameworks. Unfortunately, I don't think we already have now these specific policy conferences. And again, if you look at the Zimbabwean context, we're still grappling with a lot of issues to do with whether our tax and taxation regimes are giving us optimal benefits, or we are just giving away our resources. So this is why this dialogue is quite important. And to give a perspective on the conflicting ideologies on mining sector activities, I'm going to invite Mr. Farai Maguwu, who will talk to us about national resources. Nationalism. But I just want to point out that this is not just an African problem. I will read a quotation from the former Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, He says in 2012, and here is the rub: you don't own the minerals. I don't own the minerals. Governments only sell you the right to mine the resource, a resource we hold in trust for a sovereign people. She spoke about this at a mining industry dinner in Canberra in 2012. So even in Australia, this challenge is about harnessing natural resources for inclusive growth or development is also a problem. But if you also go to Ghana in 2019, the president of Ghana, Akufo-Addo, told the investment in African mining indaba that I believe we have come of age. We should not have royalties incentives, and mining companies should not expect to make extraordinary profits on our continent. So the issue about mining sector nationalism is all over, is being spoken about all over the world. And for us to really understand what it entails, I'm inviting Comrade Magu to speak on resource nationalism. Mr. Magu seems to be having a challenge with his network. So let's move on to Comrade Janet Jo. Do you agree with President, His Excellency Akufo-Addo, when he says we should not have to give unusual tax and royalties incentives, and the mining companies should not expect to make extraordinary profits on our continent? Kindly speak to us about fiscal transparency and harmful tax incentives in the mining sector.
Thank you very much, Comrade Peter, for this opportunity that you have given me to speak to this very important issue. And I took it up to be in this Twitter space because it is very important, and I believe it is one of those big deals that we are going to be asking questions about in the near future or at some point during the mining life cycle of this lithium deal. And we'll be asking quite a lot of questions in terms of how far have we gone on different aspects, especially when we want to use mining revenue or our mineral resources and natural resources for socioeconomic transformation. And for me, the issue of mining deals and mega deals like this, I'm sure this is going to be one of those deals that will qualify as a mega deal that the current administration will actually be highlighting going forward, is the question of whether it transforms lives and livelihoods of those who are in the area, but also at the national level. When we look at it in mining and the government's vision of the $12 billion mining economy by 2023 is already highlighted by Mukasiri. I think for most African governments, and Zimbabwe included, mainly because we already are in a crisis, a political, a social, and an economic crisis, that has meant that real investors who would do business while respecting human rights or upholding standards to respect human rights of communities, of workers, of indigenous groups, is difficult to actually come about in our situation. So we see kind of the race to the bottom that we always talk about, where we are in this competition, tax reduction and incentives competition with other African governments or recipients of in foreign direct investments. And Zimbabwe finds itself in that space. And we know that the current administration has been running the mantra of Zimbabwe is open for business. And it has put in place different mechanisms and structures and institutions to lure that foreign direct investment. And we have seen that the mining sector is one of the key sectors in which they have been trying to lure that kind of investment and having investors come in. And if you look at the profile of the investors that have been coming in, I think mostly and mainly it has been from the East. So there's the geopolitical issues in terms of investments from the West. We know that this used even to be owned by the Australians, and now there is the new investor that's coming in, and Australia will look at it as a Western investment, and the Chinese company is really more on the look East policy. And that has got its own pitfalls in terms of fiscal transparency in the mining sector. We know that there is a lot of opacity and there is a lot of secrecy when it comes to contract transparency and the real deal in terms of the benefits of the deal. So the question here that you asked, Comrade Mutasa, is it a loss or is it a win? And that, I think if we look at the big figure of 422 million, that is a mega deal. But we need to break it down then if we're talking about fiscal transparency and say, what is it going to mean in the long run? What tax incentives, for example, because this is a special economic zone as well that we are talking about. What is the revenue that is going to be forgone maybe in tax incentives? How are the labor laws, labor rights going to be respected in this particular special economic zone? How are the community rights in this area going to be respected? I was talking to people in Ward 13 just to find out how they feel and are viewing this deal in terms of whether it is a win or a loss. For them, they have not counted it in Ward 13, they have not counted it as a win because of the transparency, the contract transparency issues that we are talking about. They raised the issue of there already a community and a ward that has already been suffering from displacements because of the expansion of Harare, as an example. The mining is another big issue. And to them, they cannot reconcile Chinese operations and investments and community development. So there is, there has already been seeming hatred around Chinese investments in this area. So the issue of resource conflict is a big issue, and it is exacerbated by lack of actually transparency and community involvement in terms of exactly what the benefits are going to be, in terms of taxation, in terms of employment creation, in terms of local content development, participation in value chains and the like. So I would want to believe that if we're then talking about fiscal transparency in this whole issue, it is the involvement and inclusion of the community in the big deal that we are talking about, so that they have a stake and they are not only then going to be left maybe counting the cost around environment or, the different ills that come with big operations like this. There may be displacements, there may be compensations that need to take place around the people that are living in this area. The other issue I wanted to also raise is that as Zimbabwe, we have depended a lot around the Look East policy for investments. We have depended a lot around the Look East policy when it comes to external financing of our projects and development and infrastructure development. And this has meant that some of these deals are exacerbating the trend of resource-backed loans. So this is a fear and a concern as well that I get from where I'm sitting at ZimCord, but also from the membership that we have, because we also have operations in Goromons, and in particular, we speak a lot to people that are in Ward 18. And they raise this issue of, because we do not really know, but there is a growing trend of resource-backed loans. What does this mean? What end of the stick are we holding? Are we not holding the shorter end of the stick? So this is a big question we need to also be asking ourselves, that how is this resource coming in? How is it going to develop, the community, but also our economy, and lead to the economic recovery that we are looking at, but also sustainable mining that respects that particular community, but also that respects our own laws and regulations. But besides the community involvement and inclusion in ensuring that there is the fiscal transparency, I also tried to understand from the standpoint of accountability institutions, such as the parliament, to say how were they involved as well, so that we can determine whether this is a win, this is a loss, and ensure that there is fiscal transparency. How were the parliamentary portfolio committees that are supposed to oversee such kind of deals involved? We know that Section 327, it should be subsection 3 or so, which speaks about agreements with foreign entities, requires that Parliament plays a role in such agreements and deals. So this is also a critical question in terms of that kind of involvement. But what we see is media, we see the executive signing deals, but there is a gap in terms of what then is Parliament's role in terms of ensuring that we do not end up holding the shorter stick of the end in terms of the deal, and not put in place safeguards that will ensure that we do not suffer from the illicit financial flows that have already been spoken about by Mukasiri, but we also do not give, overly generous tax incentives, and in particular noting that, as I have said, that this is a special economic zone. And linked to the issue of the harmful tax incentives, we need to know, when we're talking about fiscal transparency, in terms of how much are we foregoing, if there are any tax holidays, if there are any tax incentives that are going to be involved. But from history, recent past, we know that other companies like Huawei, like the Great Dyke Investments, have received huge tax incentives without as well parliamentary oversight. So that is also a critical issue, because if we forego revenue from taxes without parliamentary approval, that is also unconstitutional. If you go on Section 305, which speaks of the Constitution, which speaks to the Consolidated Revenue Fund management, you see that the custodians of the Consolidated Revenue Fund is Parliament. And it is so, if you forego resources in taxes, as an example, without seeking parliamentary approval, it means you have levied the Consolidated Revenue Fund unconstitutional, which is illegal. But we have seen this happen in the past, and there is also that concern and fear that this will also happen, where we continue to illegally levy the Consolidated Revenue Fund, because taxes are part of what forms actually the bigger chunk of our Consolidated Revenue Fund. I'm coming towards the end, but I wanted to speak to the issue of contributions of these taxes to the Consolidated Revenue Fund. I was just looking at the 2021 national budget. If you look at it, the biggest contributors when it comes to our revenue is actually tax, and the taxes that contribute the most are our VAT at 24%, our payee at 17%, our corporate tax at 18%, excise duty 11.8%, other direct costs 6.4%, and the like. But if you look at this, you realize that the Consolidated Revenue Fund, as it stands, or at least from the recent past budget that we're talking about, this year, 2021's budget, the people, the ordinary citizens of Zimbabwe, are the ones who are paying the most taxes and contributing to the Consolidated Revenue Fund through the VAT, through the payee, through the IMTT tax. At the backdrop of this, because of special economic zones and special lease agreements in the extractive sector and in the mining sector, they are getting tax incentives. So who is bearing the brunt of taxation in Zimbabwe? It is the citizens. You who is formally employed, you're tax payee. When you go to the shop, you're going to pay VAT. And if you put all that together, you may realize that at the end of the day, you are being taxed over 50% of your income, which leaves you without a disposable income. And this becomes harmful. This is how harmful it is. So the big companies, the corporates at the global level, Mukasiri has shared how they are actually swindling out resources through tax evasion, tax avoidance, and the like, and illicit financial flows. And the burden is then carried by the citizens because we need to finance our own development. And a country that cannot finance its own development, honestly, there is no way that it can function properly to redistribute wealth, to provide essential services, and to ensure that infrastructure is built and also developed. So we really have a big issue around these deals when it comes to the transparency, but mainly caused by lack of transparency in the contract processes, but also in the operations, the issue of inclusion of the communities, but accountability institutions such as parliament as well being made moribund in some of these deals, I think is a major concern. Whilst we may want to celebrate these deals, they are greener in terms of lithium, this is where we are going, but what is in it for us? But because for me, like I said, from just the few conversations I've had with people in Goromons and particularly in the wards that are closer to this mining deal, there is nothing for them, and we need to consider how oversight is played by the citizens, oversight is played by parliament, but also move towards the issue of tax reforms. And I will not belabor on that because Mukasiri has already spoken about that. But I think I wanted to also raise, as I conclude and give you the mic, the issue for us to consider national strategic policy, strategic assets policy framework, or that we need to put in place. Because at the end of the day, we may say, yes, we are mining lithium. Maybe it is more greener, but what is in it for us? China is taking over. We know how they have invested in this because this is where the world is going. But as we continue to invest actually in non-renewables, look at the investments we are making in Wange, in all these areas. What are we putting in place to ensure that we secure and we ring-fence our strategic assets and resources and actually calculate the benefits? I was looking at this deal, it's an 18-year cycle, and they're saying maybe they'll be making about 175 million or so per year. If we put, and I want to believe that is very modest and conservative. How much are they going to make? And the investment that they are currently making, of course, without the finer details. So we really need to think around the national strategic policy framework that we need to put in place. We need to think about a transparent initiative framework that we also need to put in place. And I think the Africa Mining Vision, the high-level panel report of the Thabo Mbeki of 2015 has got some of these recommendations that we can take and actually domesticate if we decide not to go with the EITI as an example. I think I'll end there, Comrade Peter, and hand you over the mic. We can engage, I think, after the other speaker.
Thank you very much, Comrade Janet. And I like the way you are putting it, locating the people, locating the local communities within the transactions from the 422 million, almost half a billion. What is coming to Zimbabwe, and why is it that such a transaction that can attract such a purchase price is located in the special economic zones, and we have given away a lot of tax incentives, we may not be getting much from that transaction. What is the benefit in terms of infrastructure for the people who are around? We have had many discussions with mining community residents who have been complaining that, for example, mining trucks damaging and destroying their roads, and there is no contribution to road maintenance. Some mining operations are also destroying water sources, and there is also no on the natural resources. Who should own these resources? Why is it that in Africa and in Zimbabwe, for example, do not even know how much resources they have? They on the basis of explorations by mining companies, in most of the cases, who are external companies who are coming from different continents. And what gives us comfort that the information that we are given by these companies is accurate in terms of our mineral resource deposits and the lifespan of the mines. And again, without government involvement and government control of the process, what gives us comfort that the quality that we are told is what is being mined at that particular mine is and the revenue that we are getting from exporting those minerals is correct? So these are many questions that we have, and to try and answer that ideological question, who should own mineral resources in our country? I want to invite Comrade Farai. Unfortunately, he seems to be having some challenges, but I hope this time you'll be able to get in and speak to us. But before that, there's been a recent report by Verisk Maplecroft in March 2021, and the report is saying that there's been increased natural resource nationalism government assertion of control of a country's natural resources saw an increase in 34 countries worldwide in 2020. So it's not just in Zimbabwe where the citizens are questioning the mining deals, it's everywhere, 34 countries in Africa. And the report says these governments are becoming more willing to intervene in the economy, using indirect expropriation or demand increases in local content requirements, opening the door to a more sophisticated resource nationalism path. This has happened in Mexico and in Argentina, for instance. And in Mexico and Argentina, ideology is the main driving force, while in Colombia and Chile, pressure comes from communities, both those hosting mining projects and civil society more generally. So the question that we would want to discuss further with Comrade Janet and Comrade Mukasiri is what is the role of citizens? What is the role of the opposition? What is the role of civic society? What is the role of labor in all these transactions? For the lithium mine, it appears all of us are out. How do we come in? How do we become part of it? But allow me to invite Comrade Farai.
Thank you, Comrade Mutasa, and apologies for my connection, which is very erratic. And I'll try to maximize the time you have given me before I get cut off again. So I want to thank you for organizing this. It's very important, and I think we need to do this quite often. Talking about our natural resources, how they are being governed, and how things can be done differently for the benefit of us and also future generations of our country. So I want to also pay homage to my colleagues who have spoken ahead of me, Comrade Mukasiri and Janet. I appreciate the submissions they've made. And I'll start by saying, why resource nationalism?
It appears we are losing Comrade Farai again. So maybe may I open the floor for interventions from all the listeners. Those who want to speak, may you kindly request to speak. A comrade identified as Pump Up. You may speak.
Good evening. Good evening. I just want to raise a question by why Africa is lagging behind on many things, like on the minings. Check, for instance, gold. Gold was being mined in Africa for many decades years ago, and the end user was, for instance, Britain is lying with many resources of gold taken from Africa. And other gold is also being taken from Zimbabwe. So why can't we change the status quo whereby the end production of these minerals be done in Africa, be done in Zimbabwe, so that these things, I mean, like this mineral which is being lithium. How many jobs we've created if we all the industry that the end result of production of lithium is made in Zimbabwe. So I'm so disheartened. Why are we repeating the same old thing in this century? Why Africa can't raise up and think that this is the opportunity to make our children have a cake from our resources? That is my take on this subject. You can go on.
Very much. Do we have another person want to speak or want to put up a question to the speakers? The question from the comrade there is, why are we repeating the same mistake time and again? If you look at the current trend, Africa is no longer thinking to look the anything. Center for the South, for the New South, Africa's mining potential, trends, opportunities, challenges, and strategies. The figures that we are talking about, the report says Africa is immense natural resources endowments, especially minerals used for technological development and manufacturing. As concerns about global climate change continue to fuel transitions to renewable energy, Africa is poised to benefit since the continent is endowed with many of the metals and minerals critical in clean energy production. For example, Africa produces about 80% of the total world supply of platinum. 80% is not a joke. 50% of manganese, 2/3 of cobalt, and a significant amount of chromium. And demand for these minerals is expected to increase substantially in the near future. So why is Africa failing to harness its natural resources? And sub-Saharan Africa is mostly dependent on natural resources. Minerals and metal exports account for 20% on average of total merchandise exports in 2017. In some countries, minerals constitute more than 50% of total merchandise exports. And for other countries like Botswana, for example, 92% of total merchandise exports from Botswana between 2013 and 2017, and also 81% of total merchandise exports from Democratic Republic of Congo during the same period. So you see, if we are not going to be concerned about the management of our natural resources, if we are not concerned about how our natural resources are utilized, we are going to be in trouble because we depend on natural resources. Allow me to ask a comrade Innocent. Innocent,
please take the floor. Comrade Innocent.
Thank you very much, Peter, for organizing this forum. I think it is very important that we have such a discussion at this particular moment in time. I know the questions that have been posed by Mr. Pampav, and I think many of us have been engaged with those particular issues for some time. We've been asking why for some time. And I would like to think there is an elephant in the room that we have not addressed for a very long time. I think that we all know why we are here, the way we are integrated in the global economy, if I might say, maybe capitalism, if I might say white monopoly capital, if I might say how us, the African elite, you and me, we see ourselves in that global setup. There's also maybe the other side of the coin, that we know what happens to our leadership, the African leaders, who try to pose these questions and seek answers. People like Gaddafi. Gaddafi was not an angel, but we know he was someone who was engaged with this particular question, and we know what happened to him. We talk of Sankara and many other African leaders who ended up maybe being killed. We know what the French have done, for an example, in the Central African region. We know what they are doing in West Africa, how they are changing maybe leaders there, the way maybe people change their trousers. And I think this is an issue which maybe now, comrade, the other speaker who had just started was going to address when we talk of resource nationalism. It is very interesting to me at this particular moment in time that we are talking of resource nationalism at a time when it is quite naked for everybody. Looking at the vaccine nationalism, which we have seen here in Europe. Where I live, we are now talking of a fourth jab at a time when people in Africa haven't had even their first or second jabs. So maybe what I'm failing to say here is that until such a time that we address the core of the issue, that we are in this position and there's a continuation of this problem because of Western hegemony, which does not want to see the development of Africa. I know many of us, we run to the West because they are democratic and so forth and so on, and I'll be putting that in quotations. But that is what has been causing the problems which we are having. You look at how the politics in Zimbabwe, for an example, is structured right now. I don't see any discernible difference, ideologically speaking, between ZANU-PF and the so-called opposition in Zimbabwe. Neoliberal politics still continues. So until such a time, there's a deliberate ideological shift amongst us Africans that, look, we now want to see ourselves and future generation benefiting from the resources that we own. The issue that we are discussing today is going to continue. Some would argue that maybe Africa do not have the money. We don't have the resources to exploit what we own. But I would beg to differ in that particular respect. If I'm just to look at Zimbabwe, for an example, if Zimbabwe can mobilize resources to fight in Congo, to fight in Mozambique, surely, why can't we mobilize resources to take and own these mines, like the lithium example? We all know that Arcadia or whoever, the 400 and what have you million, we know that those are not the guys who are not going to exploit those resources. They are going to be holding it for the big boys. The big boys are going to come in and do the actual mining. We know the political elite are going to benefit because they are the ones who are dealing with your Arcadias and so forth and so on. So maybe I will go on and on, but what I wanted to submit was that until such a time that there's a political ideological shift, that there's a deliberate political discussion in Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa, that the white monopoly is incarnated in the West is what is causing the misery and the suffering that we are experiencing. This problem is going to continue. Thank you very much, Peter, for that.
Thank you, Comrade Innocent. And the question that I would want the speakers to also speak about is it just the West or now even the East? Because in Zimbabwe and in Africa, there's a new sort of master and quite financial big master, and controlling almost all our activities now, economic activities and to some extent political activities. But the question is quite pertinent. Are we ready to address the political question? And for comments from the opposition, I would also want to hear your views about how you see natural resource management in terms of influencing politics, or how politics is influencing natural resource management itself. Are natural resources being used to hold on power and to maintain power? Are the rents from natural resources also being used for political activities? And what is the incentive for people controlling billions of natural resources to leave power for anyone else? But let me invite Comrade Mobile, then I'll ask you the speakers to come back and share their reflections on the questions, the contributions. Comrade Mobile.
Thank you for the space. This is one that has always interested me. I remember even as a young boy when I was like at high school, and we're doing I was doing commerce and geography at the time, and they showed me the resources that were there in Zimbabwe, and then my commerce teacher, who was a little bit radical, he was like, yeah, all those minerals, they leave Zimbabwe as raw materials and come back as finished products. And he pointed to one specific thing, you know, like Italian tiles, the marble and everything. It was like, there's no marble in Italy, but we pay premium rates to have those marble tiles in our houses. And even at that point, I posed a similar question: why is it that we're not doing it ourselves? But I have since begun to realize that the truth is this: our leaders do not have the interests of their populace at heart. Because we talk about, okay, they may not have the resources to actually make up the mines and build production facilities in order to be able to export. Let's say, for example, like I'm talking about the marble, once it's finished and it's become tiles, or the stone that people use on their workshops, especially in the European areas. But funny enough, other countries, for example, Australia's and whatever, you can mortgage your resources against people coming in to invest in that. And you can decide what it is, what part they're going to play within that. So if you are going to be coming here and let's say we don't have the machines to do the mining, your part of that resource is that I'm going to mortgage off the marble that we have here in the country, X amount, you can take as payment for the fact that you've given us the mining equipment and the expertise and everything. Same way when it comes to production. But our leaders are not in any way interested in that. What they want is the money up front and put in their back pockets, and then they fly off to Monaco. And the maturity of our political populace and space in Africa as a whole is where the issue is. And I will simply say that the nice thing I see is that the youth that are coming up in Africa, and of course, Africa has now the youngest population in the world, they know this, and they are going to be our leaders very soon, notwithstanding, because our leaders are all dying. So very soon they will be the ones that will lead us into this place. But I feel at this present moment, the greed and the lack of foresight within our African leaders is what causes us to have this situation. Because even with the Chinese, if you negotiate with them and you tell them, look, we only want you to bring your mining materials and your mining expertise, once you have placed that in, and after a year or two, you've trained our people to work on the mines, you can go back and we'll give you this amount. But for us, we just say, just take the whole mine. All you have to do is just give me X amount of money. And this is our leadership, because they don't see any further than their nose. And this is where the issue is. But I think that with what we're discussing now and how we're going about talking about our natural resources, I believe that we can secure them. And I'd like to hope that the opposition party begins to speak more about this side of things, rather than about, okay, we're going to build, bullet trains and everything. I would like to know, okay, on the mineral sides, on our agricultural policies, what is it that you are building with all these players in the rest of the world? Because they should have a government in waiting before they begin, trying to say, okay, we're going to fight for whatever it is. And I don't mind whoever wins at the end of the day, but if they have those interests at heart, then I'm happy about them, no matter who it is. But if our opposition is failing to actually even bring out those policies to the public for us to see that, look, we are going to do this, secure our mining so that we start from mining all the way to production, this way and this way, step by step, then I'm confident. But at the present moment, both MDC and ZANU present no issue for me in terms of actually looking forward for them to doing something that is quantitative for the people of Zimbabwe. I rest.
Right, so thank you very much. I think we'll invite the opposition and the ruling party in the next segment and discuss about their policies. For this particular one, we've not invited them, but very pertinent questions that are being raised by all interveners and speakers here. We are getting to the close of our segment, but allow me to invite back Comrade Farai and see whether he can take on from where he left. Comrade Farai.
I don't think he will manage. So I'll go back to Comrade Mukasiri, your views on the various interventions.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I'll speak, I think, mainly to three issues as I wind up this conversation. The first one, I think, to underscore the point that let us remember, for instance, when slavery was abolished, it is the slave owners, not the slaves, who received compensation. As we talk about lithium right now, we are talking about a mineral that is very pivotal when it comes to energy transitioning from fossil fuels to what is called the clean energy. In Africa, look at Mozambique, look at Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. They've got assets that have recently discovered in terms of oil and gas. And the decarbonization agenda brought by climate change can make these assets stranded. Zimbabwe also included when you talk about the Zarabani oil and also the coal and methane gas potential. So who is going to benefit out of this transition? You bring technology. You want to hedge the transitioning of energy globally, and then also fail to recognize that the producers of these minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and mind you, Zimbabwe is also rich in graphite. How are they positioned to benefit from this? So the mathematics is simple. It's not about only revenue, but also to look at the final product. If we are talking about cobalt, which is found in all the technological issues that technological materials that we are talking about, you talk about your Tesla value, you talk about your Apple value that is going to trillions of dollars. But go to DRC, the major producer of that cobalt. How are they located in that valuation? If you remove their product, you certainly impair the value of those companies. So it's all about also addressing the global power dynamics that are skewed against the interest of the global south. That is something that we need to understand, comprehend, and confront. And the West must also take ownership. As I conclude on this first point, the major destinations of illicit financial flows from Africa, it's your Britain and its crown-dependent territories, USA, America. So they've got a part to play when it comes to curbing illicit financial flows from the continent as the major recipients of those illicit flows or resource leakages from Africa. The second point that I want just to emphasize or underscore is that let us not forget the role of multinational corporations. In this deal that we are talking about, we have got, for instance, a junior company, rightly so, that also gambles and take risks when it comes to making when it comes to trying to get a profitable enterprise through lithium. But what we should know is the company that has bought this is from China. There is the aspect of the double taxation agreement between China and Zimbabwe. And if you look closely at this double taxation agreement, just like many of them, they have got provisions that disables the taxing right of a country. So Africa must also, when we talk about fighting the sovereignty, the taxing rights of African countries, the tax sovereignty, we also look at the impact of double taxation agreements. In Kenya, Tax Justice Network Africa, for instance, has been at the forefront using the courts to fight the unjust
Right, we
grabbed the double taxation agreement that they had with Mauritius because it was unfair. So this is something that we need to look at closely. Then lastly, our problems are not technocratic. This is also according to the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows. Our problems are the political will at national, political will at regional level, looking at SADC, political will at continental level, looking at AU, and political will at global level to tackle these challenges that we are facing. So it voices count to force political action when it comes to tackling the challenges that we are faced with, the disconnect of natural resource wealth and contribution to human development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrade Farai, are you back? We still have 2 requests to speak, but Comrade Farai, if you are back, you can, in 5 minutes, probably finish up. So Comrade Farai still has some challenges. Comrade Janet, in terms of citizen agents. What
Comrade
needs to be-
Mutasa,
Yes, Comrade Farai.
sorry. I don't even know where I ended, but I still have much to share.
Please, you can proceed. You just started the concept itself. What is resource nationalism?
All right, thank you very much. So the point I was just trying to make is that natural resources are like a resource that is in the bank, which when you withdraw, you are depleting the resource. That's why we say these are non-renewable. And once they are gone, they are gone. This then calls for very important and shrewd decision making, which currently in Zimbabwe we don't have. Marange stands out very tall in terms of our incapacity to think about nation building, to think about economic development that is spurred by our natural resources. It exposed the greed that define us. I apologize for saying us because I know you did not participate in the looting, but those who did it represented us all. Therefore, it is very important that when we get a mineral like lithium, which is on demand the world over, the decision is not just made by the president and the minister of mines, but there must be wide consultation. Zimbabwe is blessed with mining technocrats. I'm talking about mining engineers. I'm talking about mining economists. I'm talking about environmentalists and even legal experts in the mining sector, where we should have first sat down and say, this is what we have. And the most important thing is also to quantify the resource before you talk about engaging investors. You can't engage an investor without knowing what you have. But because of the greediness, shallow-mindedness, we engage investors without even knowing what we are talking about. And that's why companies like Prospect Resources, when they were given the mining rights, they made millions out of it without producing anything. And what it means is that someone sitting in Hong Kong, in London, in New York, with shares in Prospect Resources is pocketing millions without even producing anything at Acadia Mine. And I'm equally surprised that the president presided over the signing ceremony of this transfer of mining rights from Prospects to Yuanoi Company of China, when there is no benefits accruing to Zimbabwe as a country. I think we don't have a business model in the mining sector. If we have a model, it's a very self-serving model, which is only serving the interest of the ruling elites and not the interest of us as a country, as a people. And I've come across this throughout Zimbabwe, where government makes a deal very secretive at midnight with so-called investors. And they are sent out to the provinces to go and extract. And when the local people try to question, who are these people? Who gave them permission? It is like there is a declaration of war on Zimbabwe. The state security apparatus is deployed in full force to intimidate the people not to question these deals. And ladies and gentlemen, whenever you find natural resources being extracted in that context where government has to deploy security forces to suppress the voices of the people, then we are in the race to the bottom. Do not expect anything good to come out of such deals. They ruin a nation. So when you look at the prospect deal, Janet said earlier on, it is actually situated in a special economic zone. I also need to find out whether it's also been granted a tax holiday, but Zimbabwe is very good with granting tax holidays before anything has been done. And these things are undermining our country in that resources are extracted for many years with nothing accruing to the treasury. What we need to see as Zimbabweans is more revenues being generated from our natural resources, which currently we are giving away for free, and very little in terms of royalties are going to the treasury. And that's why government is struggling to pay competitive salaries to civil servants because the coffers are empty. And yet when you compare the emptiness of our state coffers with the volume of minerals leaving this country daily, you would agree that we are not making the best decisions with regard to our natural resources. I would also talk about a model where the state need to participate in mining. If, say, this lithium deal, because we all know that lithium is in high demand right now in the whole world, if Prospects was in partnership with, say, Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation, I think the outcry would not be as loud as it is today. What is making us very irate is that this is our resource, which is exchanging hands beyond our borders. Nothing is going to the local banks. Nothing is going to treasury. People who don't own the resource are pocketing hundreds of millions of dollars when our government is pleading poverty. So we need patriotic decision making when it comes to natural resources. Zimbabwe is a country that is blessed with a lot of experts that we need to make use of. So the negotiations for mining deals must not be a secretive affair involving the president, involving the minister, and some senior party and security officials. That is a wrong model, and it's not taking us anywhere. And if anything, the recent past 2 decades tells us that this model is creating inequality. It's creating anger in the communities where mining is taking place. It's making us fools before the world, where we don't have roads, our roads are in an advanced state of disrepair. Our hospitals are death traps because we don't have money. And yet we are one of the biggest donors to the world, giving the world what they don't have for nothing. And I think this call should be an invitation to a national dialogue about our natural resources. What really do we want to get out of our natural resources? I'm one of the proponents who say, if we don't have a plan of how to convert our mineral wealth into financial benefits. It is safer to leave the minerals in the ground. Just like if you don't have a plan about how to use your money in the bank, leave it in the bank rather than withdrawing it without a plan. That's what Zimbabwe is doing. We are withdrawing our natural capital without a plan about how to use it. And finally, the concept of devolution must extend to natural resources. We have a situation where decision-making in the mining sector is very centralized, and the people affected by the mining itself are not consulted. So if you want to see development in Mtoko, if you want to see development in Hwange, in Gwanda, in Marange, give the local authorities power to decide and to engage investors in a transparent way. But the situation we have today, where most of the investors operating in Zimbabwe since 2017 are operating using what are called special grants. And the special grants are issued primarily by the Minister of Mines, and he uses very wide discretionary powers. And in the case of oil and gas and coal, the special grants are issued by the president. But the districts where the mining take place are not consulted. Hence, my recommendation is that we need to ensure that there is devolution of decision-making. The current model of devolution, where government gives a few $100,000 to rural district councils, is not working. The rural district councils must have ownership over natural resources occurring in their places. And there must be a workable relationship between the local and the national. You can't go and exploit my resources in a district and the people suffer environmental degradation simply because they are so-called national interests. And when you try to pursue what are these national interests, you realize that it's only a few individuals, a small cartel of individuals, well connected politically, that have conferred on them the status of being the custodian of national interest. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not working. We need to mobilize Zimbabweans and say no to the current model of mining, which is benefiting a few people at the expense of the nation. We must also ensure that we monitor how our natural resources are connected to political parties' financing. Because we're having a situation where natural resources are being mortgaged for power, where deals are being made to support electoral outcomes using natural resources. So there is a need for research and investigations, especially even this Arcadia thing. I think what we know is a tip of an iceberg. I don't see the reason why the president must go and preside over such a ceremony where the treasury, his minister of finance, is not receiving even $100 and the president goes to preside over Prospect Resources receiving $422 million from China, and nothing is going to treasury. I don't know what gratifies the president in such a deal. Hence, there is need to ensure that all these mining deals that we read on paper, we dig deeper and know what is in it for Zimbabwe. We must hold members of parliament accountable. They have a constitutional duty to demand accountability on decisions being made by the executive. And civil society also is doing its best, but we can do more to research and write reports on what is happening. I think let me end here. Thank you very much, Comrade Mutasa.
Thank you. It's just a tip of an iceberg. We are about to round off, but I see 4 requests to speak, and it's your space. So let's hear the reactions. Thank you, Comrade Farai, for that fiery presentation. I'll start with Comrade Ella, then Comrade Chapman and Comrade Mapipi. So, Ella, you can take the floor.
Thank you, Peter, and greetings to you and all the listeners here. I want to thank Mr. Farai there for his remarks on the topic. I think that personally, honestly, I believe we should really stay far away from the West, the blame to the Western world. And maybe that can be a long-term thing that we can focus on. But in the short term, yes, we really do need to deal with our own leaders. What are we doing at home? Because the last I checked, the Henriettas of this world, the ones who have been smuggling gold and everything else out of the country, they're not from the West. And they have been caught at our own airports, borders, including the SADC region, caught not by Westerners, but by fellow Africans. I'm not sure what has become of that in terms of the one that was caught in South Africa. But we all know with Henrietta, nothing happened to her. So to me, it's very clear, I think, for all of us that it's a problem of bad management. We have bad managers at the helm of our home, Zimbabwe, and that's what we really need to deal with. Right now, I can't even say let's blame the West or regarding your topic here, harnessing natural resources for inclusive development for Zimbabwe, because the people that are stealing all the wealth, which you pointed out as being, in the name of national interest, which we all know is really personal interest and personal development, nothing to do with the nation. They have connived with people who are obviously out of Zimbabwe. And these are personal deals that they are doing. That's what we need to deal with, our own, before we even try to deal with the West. Because as for the West, it's business. And the people who are a problem are our own government, who are bad businessmen. So I really for trying to find out, in regards to your topic, what is it that we can do? We, the people of Zimbabwe, what is it that we can do to harness, as you say in your topic, the natural resources for inclusive development for our country? What can common folk in the communities do legally? What is it we can do? Yes, we have seen all the fights that have been done legally in terms of places like Chilonga, and various other places, the battles where we have seen either Chinese or any other person for that matter trying to mine resources illegally and all that kind of stuff. But what is it? I would like to know. I think those are the things that we need to know as a people. What is it that we can do? What is it that's within our power? Because obviously the legal framework right now, as you've pointed out, some of the speakers here, that it's not enough. It's inadequate to provide that. Excuse me, to provide that environment for us to harness these natural resources. So what is it that we need to do as a people?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. And that is a very important question. What is it that we need to do? I'm reading here on 23 December 2021 news article. Chubut governor refused um, mining law after days of protests. Thousands of people took to the street in Chubut capital, Roson, on 20 December to celebrate the abrogation of the law that allowed mega mining in Chubut province in Argentina. So at the end of the day, we have to decide, we have to act as citizens in order for us to change the situation. But let's hear from Chapman. Chapman, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Comrade Mutasa. Thank you for everyone that has spoken. This is a great conversation. I had a sort of, and I hate Twitter debates. I had a Twitter debate with someone who I eventually challenged to come on Zoom with me when this deal was done, so we can see each other's faces and make sure I wasn't talking each other at the time. I'm talking to a ghost account. But here's how I look at this. I'm in the energy sector, and I live here in the United States. And lithium is at the core of the future. If we understand really the severity and the impact that how negative this deal is economically, not just to Zimbabwe, but to the region and the African Union, I blame everything all the way to the top, all the way to the African Union, that these deals have to be reviewed in the interest, especially if we look back in the history and trace and learn from the DRC or from the Congo. We learn from how those minerals have been exploited. I want to give my sister Janet a huge thank you. Her submission at the beginning of this really covers pretty much everything. And I thought to myself, there's nothing I can share after her submission, because she touched on everything that has to do with economic development. Even if we take away the mining sector, the mining parts of this, is the impact it's going to have on the society, impact it's going to have on government. So and on Zimbabwe. Here's what I have noted down, and forgive me if I'm going to be lengthy, but I'm going to go as fast as I can. I believe that at the core of our problems in our country is judicial accountability. It is 100% judicial accountability, meaning that at the core, we don't have really investigative, transparent, and public judicial review on major deals and cultural impact, meaning that someone can literally watch online as companies that are bidding for major deals are talking, local chiefs or local community leaders are involved with this local MP, and they're going through sort of a Senate hearing with a committee tied, as my brother Farai was mentioning, that we need to have structures in place to really ascertain by the time we give this, or we're vetting outsiders to look at our mineral resources, that we internally have looked at this closely and said we cannot do this ourselves, or regionally we cannot do this, and we're bringing someone else in with certain things in place that we would ask questions. But that judicial accountability lacks in every facet of our society, as my sister J. Ella just mentioned, Henrietta, with her gold. She has not been held accountable for something as 6 kilograms. If we can't do that at that small, minuscule level, how in the world are we going to hold someone accountable when they're extracting billions of dollars of resources? Government oversight and accountability, parliamentary, private sector, and regional accountability are very important in this, as this affects immigration laws, migration policies, and what it does for wildlife impact in some of the regions that they go into. The next thing I put down here was supply chain development. We have to really look at supply chain development on the basis of domestic job creation and middle income benefits and middle income jobs. And also the attraction of talent, meaning that we're now having people move to Zimbabwe that are bringing special talent. If you look at places like China, Singapore, even the United States, when Joe Biden came in and he said, we're moving solar, we're no longer going to add tariffs to China, all those companies that were based in China and Korea, they started building factories in the United States. And what happened is it attracted talents to start applying for those jobs. People that might have been moving to China to work for Chinese companies started remaining in the United States. And not only did it create manufacturing sector, it also created jobs and kept that talent in the country. It didn't leave to go work for companies, also to go work for those foreign companies. Manufacturing is a big part of the supply chain because it encompasses construction, maintenance systems, and the manufacturing itself. commercialization of these products. Once they're made there, we can commercialize them regionally, domestically, and so forth. Transport and logistics. Throughout the entire process, there's transport and logistics involved. All these parts of the supply chain, just from this one mineral, lithium, is thousands and thousands of jobs with billions of dollars in revenue and generational wealth for Zimbabweans and Zimbabwean companies. This is very, very important to understand. We have lost more than just the mine, what the mine is going to produce. We've lost everything that goes to a final product in that lithium process. The EV sector, if you look at just in the last 12 to 18 months, Volkswagen is built a manufacturing an assembly plant in Kenya. You look at just last week, I posted General Motors has gone to Egypt. We could have attracted those companies for their electric vehicles to come to Zimbabwe and build manufacturing plants, knowing that the lithium supply chain for battery was going to be located right next door to them. And the jobs associated with that supply chain are astounding. The income that's generated and the taxation that goes back into the Zimbabwean coffers allows people to have a better quality of life. I'm telling you, I'm so disappointed in this deal. And I'm going to leave you with this last one here. You know, I want to leave you with a couple of questions. You know, the thing that I would say is, for me, the first thing I realized, I have to stop personally operating from the back, meaning that I cannot wait for news to come out for me to realize something was done. You know, someone said some deals are being made in the middle of the night. We can no longer allow that as citizens. This is one of the first things we have to do. We have to be involved in this. We have to be on the ground talking to people, and information has to be flowing to people, because obviously judicial accountability and government oversight is not working. Otherwise, this would have been brought up by an MP somewhere, would have said, are you guys aware that this thing's about to get sold? And they would have raised the flag, and citizens would have mobilized and said, no, we're going to go stand with the citizens in that community, and this is not going to be dug into the ground until we have answers and we interview this organization. The MPs of those regions have failed the people of those regions in not raising the flag, saying something is happening on the ground here. And so that's the question I'll leave you with is, the major deals of Zimbabwe, are we saying Zimbabwe first, which is building Zimbabwe by Zimbabweans? If we are moving in that strategy, I think we'll find that we can still progress in our economic development while protecting our heritage and our cultures, as well as increasing our commercial revenue and benefiting our daily lives as citizens on the ground. The last question I'll leave you with is, how do political actors today seeking to take the executive office plan to address these deals if they take office, which is only 18 months away? How are you going to go stand up and talk about a deal that was just done 18 months ago? And what is your strategy around that? Because we've got deals that go back a long way, which I would love to see. The last part, I'd love to see the impact those deals have made on the country. How many jobs have they created? How much tax revenue have created? My sister Janet alluded to this, which I was shocked. Like, we have to really look at this and say, has this process been working? If not, there has to be pressure in these elections coming up on these MPs. We want to hear how you're going to address heritage and cultural protections in the face of economic development, because both have to go together. We cannot ignore wildlife. We cannot ignore cultural issues. We cannot ignore environmental issues. But we understand that we have to progress as a society and build our economy and be competitive, not just in the region, but be competitive in the world. So that's the last thing I'll leave you with. Last one I'm going to do is I'm going to post a video. A colleague of mine at Stanberry Research did an awesome video in 2019 that talks about how China has developed itself. You have to understand this, you know, part of this is business. It's horrible business. It's bad business, but we are to blame. Our leadership is to blame. If we're really going to be honest with that, our leadership is to blame, and we are to blame as well, because these deals with a Zimbabwean national signed those documents. We have to understand that at the end of the day, someone somewhere that we entrusted to look out for our best interests signed these documents. And we have to understand, if we don't put Zimbabwe first, we don't put Southern Africa first, and we don't unify ourselves as the African Union, even with the African Free Trade Agreement, we will continue to see these things happening across the world. I would love to see us say, you know what, the mineral stays here, but if you want to be part of this, you need to bring your factories here. And we need to understand what percentage of jobs are going to be locally employed. We want a 70% local job employment. You can still own your company, but we want accountability. And you have to go in front of a judicial committee and present to us how you intend to maintain structure in our country. So thank you very much. Great conversation. And thank you for this. This really hurt me when I saw this come out. Thank you.
Comrade Chapman, and I'm very grateful from your contributions. You raised a lot of issues, and that are very important. We are going to have another segment with economists, development economists, free market economists, those who believe in the leftist policies. I would like you to connect with me, and I would like to invite you as a speaker and raise these issues about forward and backward linkages. We can still salvage something. The Constitution grants us the right to information. Comrade Janet and Comrade Farai, those leaders in the civic society, we're not able to demand that we see the contracts, we see the agreements on this deal. Does it address these issues that you're talking about, the labor rights, the technological exchange or transfer of technological knowledge, the forward and backward linkages? What can we still salvage? Of course, we've handed over the mineral rights, but are we, with Chinese, normally they bring everything. They bring the raw materials, they bring the labor, they bring almost everything. So what is going to be the benefit to our own local companies, to our small and medium enterprises, to the workers who are supposed to be working and getting technological transfer and technological knowledge? So I think this will be a very good conversation, and I really wish to invite you as a speaker. From there, I think the message is we can still salvage something from this, and this is the start of the discourse. Let's continue. The last speaker is Comrade Mapipi, and I wanted Comrade Janet to conclude by highlighting the major issues coming out, but I'm seeing that she has left. Comrade Mapipi.
Thank you so much, my brother Peter, for hosting this space. And I just want to thank the previous speakers. They've raised quite very important issues regarding our natural resources. Firstly, I just want to try and point out that I think we all agree that Zimbabwe is one of the richest countries in the world, not only in Africa, but in the world in terms of resources. We are talking about gold, diamonds, lithium, platinum, the list goes on. We have got everything that you can think of. Okay, but I think what we lack is proper planning and proper business models around our natural resources. What do we do with our natural resources? I think the main issue we face is that we don't have really sound leadership that can lead us in this particular arena to make sure that the country moves forward. I'll give you an example. I think if you look at Botswana, they've got one major resource. They've got diamonds. And Botswana, what they've done is they've managed to set up a fund which they use as a country. Whatever diamonds are extracted in Botswana, they go to this fund and they sell them, they build this fund. And from this fund, that's where they build their hospitals, that's where they pay the social security money to people who don't work. That's basically support the Pula itself, this Botswana Diamond Fund. If we as Zimbabwe, we could forget about lithium and everything else, just look at the gold. If we had a gold fund in Zimbabwe, we could be the next Singapore in Africa. We could do anything, even the bullet trains, whatever you need, because we know where exactly our gold is going. If it's properly managed, properly organized by forward-thinking leadership, we could be having the world-class hospitals in Zimbabwe. I'll tell you one thing. One thing we need to understand is some countries in the world who have got gold, they don't sell their gold. If you've got gold and you mine it, you convert it, it's refined into bullion, you can use that to go on a trading platform. And you can get as much as 100% profits per month, and the gold still remains yours. You don't have to sell it. And by doing that, we could do anything we want in Zimbabwe. Anything. Build hospitals, schools for free, universities for free, anything we want in Zimbabwe. And just imagine what sort of a country we would be if we would put our gold together and make sure that we just deposit it in a commercial bank and then use it as a leverage and go on a trading platform. I mean, it's insane. We have got lots of money in Zimbabwe, but it's the leadership that we lack. To be honest, I think it's all to do with greed. Just saying that, okay, it's just me who want to be rich, not the next person, not all the citizens in Zimbabwe who can enjoy the benefits of the resources that we have. I think we need this kind of conversation. I was so happy when I saw this conversation happening on, this space happening, because these are the conversations that we should have. We have got great thinkers, we've got bankers, we've got a lot of technocrats dotted around the world who can sit down on a table and say, look, this is the gold we have got. This is the lithium we have got. What are we going to do with the lithium that we have got? What is the market saying about lithium? You know, so it's so frustrating because Zimbabwe is poor, but it's rich. That's where we find ourselves. It's really, really poor. People are struggling. When they go to hospital, there's no medication, there's no theaters to do the operations, but we have got so much wealth. We just need that organization, that mentality that, look, what we need to do is to make sure that every citizen benefits from the wealth that we have. I think that's my contribution. Thank you so much.
And I can feel the pain, and it's the pain that we are all sharing. We are just in each country, but that is not reflecting in the provision of social services. So, comrades, thank you very much. We can pick the most important aspect. There are two most important issues that we need to address: the natural resources. And I think we should invite the politicians from all the main political parties and discuss this, as well as the civic society players, activists, and even those who are in the communities, those who are feeling it, those who are feeling the pain. They should also air their views, and we should also look at that. But if you look at the politics, Comrade Farai raised an important aspect. It has got to do with power retention. It has got to do with the elections. Comrade Chapman was questioning, we are just few months to elections, and how will the politicians spin this and use it? Where are the jobs? They're not worried about that. They're just worried about the statistics. They're just worried about the mega deal pronouncements. They are short-term in nature. They just look at power retention. And this is an important aspect we need to address. The politics of it cannot be addressed by these technical dialogues only, by technical jargons and a number of intellectual discussions. It eventually needs people to take collective action, in my view. We need to organize, we need to mobilize. These dialogues are important for clarification of issues, for clarification of ideologies and setting the agenda. But effectively, Zimbabweans have to come together and demand, like we have seen in Argentina, where people were in the streets until the governor reverses his decree, his law on mining, and now is calling for a plebiscite for people to decide. And this is democracy. So we need to look at that. We also need to invest in research and development, and also investigation, as one comrade said. We need to know who is benefiting. We can't just accept that $500 million is just going to Australians, and no local player is benefiting. We need transparency. We need to know the conditions, the terms and conditions of these contracts. So I think as civic society and as citizens, we have got a lot to do. But we also picked that we need to address the policy aspect. And Comrade Chapman was very clear on that, and he raised a lot of suggestions. In one of the policy briefs of the International Growth Center, it points out that most governments are failing in the policy chain itself, which starts from discovering. A lot of governments are under investing in prospecting. Most governments, including our government, do not know the amount of resources that we have, and we need to also have a policy dialogue on how we can improve our policy in discovery and in exploiting. What are the new trends? Most the current trends now are not selling the resources outrightly and some giving someone to own 100%. They are now a number of arrangements like joint operating agreements and other partnership contracts. There are a lot of other options, alternatives. And again, governments are failing in that. Partnership sharing contracts, some countries are moving through that. Someone was talking about Botswana. Botswana is owning 50% and De Beers is owning 50%. And someone was saying Botswana will soon be owning 80% and De Beers 20% according to the contract. So we need to also investigate and look at that. Comrade Janet was also talking about taxation, which is the third chain in the policy chain. We need to relook at our taxation and then looking at investing in investing. How are we going to ensure that the rents that we are getting in this mineral resource are going to be used to invest in local communities, in our infrastructure? Why are mining companies no longer building schools, building clinics, building hospitals, and building road infrastructure, building their own power supply systems, which can also benefit the local communities? And we need to look at that and how eventually are we going to invest for future generations? Are we going to have our mineral resources wealth funds? And why do we not have the wealth funds in Africa, which are supposed to be in billions or trillions by now? So I think we need to continue these conversations. And as we have pointed out, you have pointed out, we need more conversations with various people. We're going to invite economists next and to talk about the fiscal regimes that we must put in place. We are also going to invite lawyers to look at the legal side. We are going to invite politicians, and definitely we should come up with a police advocates tool that we can then use to embed government. We can use to also go into communities and to organize and mobilize. I think this spaces was an eye-opener. I'm sorry for my somehow subdued posture in the early dialogue session. I just received a message that I lost my auntie. Unfortunately, I couldn't stop the dialogue because it already started. But God bless you all. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you.